Hey guys, we're going to talk about some breeding tips and answer a few questions. Let's take that kennel to the next level. What's up guys? First things first, I want you guys to meet Petty. He's a beautiful little pup that we have as a possible co-own option. I'm not sure if we're going to let him go yet or not, but he's super nice. The boy's shredded. He's like 6.5 inches tall. Has 11.5 inch head already at 8 weeks old. He's blasted. Super cool little dude. But anyways, he's the 3rd generation bully barn stuff. Super nice little pup. Like I said, he'll be a possible co-own. We'll just see how that goes. To the video, let's talk about it. Let's get into some breeding tips. Let's get into some questions. I think this is going to end up being a really good video, and I'm super stoked to let you guys get some of this information. All right, first things first. We got what makes a good breeder. And that was a really good question. I think what makes a good breeder is not just pairing 2 dogs together. You know, I don't even care if you're throwing 2 champions together or 2 grand champions together. If they don't complement each other, because all dogs have flaws. So if they don't complement each other, it's a bad pairing. And you may not even produce a grand champion or a champion off that. So I think what makes a good breeder is not just throwing dogs together, because anybody can be a breeder. But what makes a great breeder is how you put dogs together. And what you're trying to fix, did you fix it? Can you make a good pick off of your litter? All those things come into play. If you know how to consistently choose nice pups that pertain to the standard, that have features and traits that you have improved on, that's what's gonna take you to the next level. You're not just gonna be, oh my gosh, overnight I'm a next level breeder. It doesn't happen like that. It's not going to happen like that. Just because you produce 1 champion or 1 grand champion doesn't make you the best breeder in the world. You know, although some people like to believe that, but that's not the case. It's all about consistency in all your breedings. And when you're picking dogs that are close to that standard, and we're going to talk about that on this board here in a second, that's what makes a good breeder. When you're consistently picking dogs that have good headpiece, good bone, thick body throughout, short backs, nice front shoulder sets, and angles in the front end, good forechest here in the front, rear angles. If all of that stuff is correct, there's a good chance your dog's gonna move well because of how the dog's built. So you need to learn the anatomy of the dogs. You need to learn how to pair the dogs together, learn how to make picks that pertain to all these things. And I'm not gonna get into the crazy details about like tail sets and other stuff like that, because a lot of times that stuff is, I don't feel like it's a dominant thing. Bad tail sets and stuff like that. So when you see a tail that's messed up, you're gonna be like, the dog's tail's messed up, like it's way high on its butt, you know, or it's super short. Like, you're gonna see those things. And I think a lot of tail genetics that are bad are recessive, because even when you go to shows and stuff, or when you produce litters, a lot of times you don't see dogs that have messed up tails. If you do, it's like maybe 1 out of 9, 1 out of 8, you know, out of a litter or something. Or if you go to the show ring, you might see 1 out of 15 or 20 dogs that has a tail that's a little bit high set or a little bit short. So that's not really a huge concern. Most of these things I feel like that I have up here are the most important things, obviously, besides health. Obviously, we want healthy dogs. So don't be in my comments talking about, oh, health comes first. I get that. This is, all of this is if your dog is healthy. If your dog's not healthy, don't breed it. So obviously, health comes first, guys. We don't want dogs that are dying at 2 years old. You know, we don't want dogs, we're not breeding dogs that have heart murmurs, you know, stuff like that. So obviously the dog's healthy. All these things I feel like are some of the most important things. And like I said, if all this stuff comes into play and you do have proportion is key. If you have all those things, chances are the dog is going to move well. If the dog has a short upper arm, or the dog has a long hock, or, you know, it's sickle hocked, or it's really stiff in the rear, or severely cow hocked, or tighten the elbows in the front end, all those things are going to mess up your dog's movement. All those things are. So if you have all these things into place, chances are your dog's probably going to move pretty effortlessly. All right, so to me, that's what makes a good breeder. All right, next question is, what are realistic expectations when breeding American bullies? And that was a really good question. I think a lot of it is, it depends on what you're breeding for. If you're just breeding for, you know, an extreme dog and that's all you care about, you have no knowledge of the standard, you're breeding basically pet quality dogs. If you don't know how to pair dogs together and you don't care about conformation, you don't care about how the dog moves, then chances are you're probably not going to be well sought after in the future from anybody wanting to get anything off your kennel or from your program. I think you should be aiming to, your realistic expectations is you're not going to produce 3 or 4 grand champions off every litter you produce. That's the reason why a champion title or a grand champion title is not easily obtained. If it was, everybody would do it. You know, everybody would have champions. And it just doesn't happen like that. So, that's a very unrealistic expectation. You're not going to nail every single breeding you do is not guaranteed, oh, I'm producing champions. I'm producing champions. There's going to be some breedings that you may pair together in hopes of, hey, I might get something that is well put together, that is, you know, that has a lot of breed type, you know, that has all the things on the board that we sit and talk about right here, okay? You may land something like that is spectacular off of a breeding that you meant to do just in hopes to improve on, you know, say, substance and bone. But I think a realistic goal is you should be shooting for a show quality dog or something that is very close to a show quality dog, but not quite a show quality dog. So basically like a brood stock type of dog. And if you can land either one of those, that is going to propel and progress your program forward in a positive direction. But you should study the standard. You should know what you're talking about. You should know what you're doing when you're pairing breeding, when you're pairing dogs together. That's a huge deal. So you shouldn't be pairing 2 dogs together that both have the same flaw. Their parents have the same flaw. You're trying to fix flaws when breeding. So a realistic goal is like, hey, I should try to fix 1 problem at a time. If I can fix 2 problems at a time, awesome. If I can fix 3 problems at a time, phenomenal. And then boom, you're headed in the right direction. When you're talking about expectations as far as putting pairings together and breeding dogs, your expectation should be, hey, can I improve? You know, that's a solid expectation. Whether you're going to produce a show dog, or you're just going to, maybe you're starting off with a dog that, if you're rating a dog a 1 out of 10, maybe you're starting out with a 6. But the dog has like 2 or 3 really, really good things that you want to push forward with. Try to fix all the bad things. Obviously, if your dog is rated a 2 or 3, you know, or a 4, I think you should probably just pet home that dog, purchase another dog, and try to move forward. But you guys get the concept. I'm just saying, you should be trying to improve. That's the expectation. The expectation is improve. You know, every generation, improve. If you took a step back, you might go back and do a little studying and say, hey, why did I pair 2 dogs together? They both have a short upper arm. They're both cowhawks. They both have really long backs. And they both have snippy headpieces. And then you wonder why you got the same exact thing. The whole entire litter has long backs, snippy muzzles, so you didn't get much improvement. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about expectations. And that was a really good question, because I feel like a lot of people don't actually let that sink in and pay attention, like, hey, am I actually bettering? Or am I just putting dogs together trying to make money? I mean, expectation-wise, you should be trying to improve. If you're improving, then you're on the right track. That was a really good question, guys. All right, guys, another one. And I like this one, too, because it kind of pertains to the 2 questions that we just answered. And it is, what are my breeding tips? Or what are my breeding suggestions / tips? And that's why I did this video. That's why I talked about the first 2 questions, because I feel like they go really well with this one. Basically, kind of like an overview of what we previously talked about. And we're going to talk about this board here for a second. So, my breeding tips. Every time you do a breeding, you should be looking for all of these things. A lot of people only look for just one thing. They're like, oh, I want to, you know, my dog has a high rear. You know, I want to get a good top line. Well, how do you get a good top line? You got to have a dog that has good pasterns, nice stiff pasterns. You got to have a good front shoulder set, good upper arm length, okay? You got to have a nice short back, thick body, good turn in the rear, a nice length of the hock. You don't want it too long. You don't want a stiff rear. You get a short upper arm, you're already hurting your chances of having a good top line. If you have a dog that's stiff in the rear, you're already hurting your chances of having a good top line, because it's going to throw that rear up higher in the air. There's a lot of things that pertain to a dog having a good top line. So if you can learn what creates a nice top line, that's how you get a nice top line. You're not just going to breed a dog that has a good top line and it's going to give you a good top line. You have to understand there's balance between the front and the rear end. Everything has to be balanced, and what that basically means is in sync with each other. If your dog has a short upper arm, it's only going to be able to reach out in front of it so far. So it's going to take little bitty steps. If the rear is really well balanced, has nice angles in the rear and a nice square rear. It's got good drive off the rear. It moves well off the rear, but the front end doesn't match. The dog's not going to move effortlessly. You're going to see those things, okay? So the top line comes together when the dog is very well put together. So that's what you've got to pay attention to get a good top line. It's not just a rear. A lot of people think a dog has a bad top line just because of the rear. I think 65 to 70% of the time, it's the front end that causes a bad top line, not the rear end. But like I said, guys, we're talking about breeding tips. So how to get a good top line. You're breeding all of these things every time you pick puppies, every time you put dogs together. You're looking at all of these things. You're looking at the headpiece. What does the headpiece need? It needs top skull. It needs a good muzzle length. You don't want a long, snippy muzzle. It needs good cheeks, a good size head, and you need good eye separation. Nice almond eyes that are pretty, not round bulldog eyes, okay? That's things that you have to look at and study the standard. All that stuff is on the standard, every bit of it. And that's, when I post this stuff, I'm posting what pertains to the standard, the ABKC standard. And this is basically the silhouette that the standard is calling for. So you're also looking at bone. A lot of people also think like, oh, you know, they're looking at their own yard, they're looking at their dogs, and they're like, oh, my dog's got good bone. You think that. Wait until you go to a show and you actually see a dog that has good bone. Don't be kennel blind, in a sense. That's a really big deal. And yes, you can have pride in your dog. You can think that your dog looks good. You can think that your dog's pretty. You might like a more classic style headpiece. You may like a snippier muzzle. But at the end of the day, what does that standard call for? Regardless of what you like, you need to be breeding toward the standard. Period. So you're also looking at the back length. You want a nice short back. Front shoulder set and angles, okay? Right here. Let me get my pen out of my pocket real quick. I'll stand up and show you guys. Okay? And I did this little dotted line for you guys to check this out. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about front shoulder sets and angles, because I feel like a lot of people don't understand what this really means. Okay? Shoulder lay. This is the shoulder blade right here. Shoulder lay is the shoulder layback, if you've ever heard that term, guys. This is the upper arm. So you want the upper arm to be equal length as the scapula, as the shoulder blade. And if you drew a dotted line, if you drew a line through the shoulder blade all the way down, I'm going to do a dotted line all the way down right here. This dotted line that comes across here and the dotted line that comes up here, that's a 90 degree angle right here. If you split that, it's a 45 degree angle. So that's a 45 degree shoulder lay. Okay, the shoulder lays back 45 degrees. That's going to give you good reach in the front end. Those are things you got to pay attention to, and that's what I'm talking about on front shoulder sets. You'll see if you have a good front shoulder set and you have good upper arm length, you can draw a line down the dog's chest right here, and then you can draw a line down the elbow. From the elbow down to the ground, you're going to have some space here. If you have a short upper arm and you don't have correct shoulder lay, you're not going to have any space right here. It's going to be steep, and you'll see that. So go pay attention to that when you look at people's side stacks. Pay attention to this area right here. This is called forechest. If you have good upper arm length and good shoulder lay, you're going to have good forechest. And what it is that chest sticks out. You're going to see that. This is, like I said, this is a 45 degree angle. From here, boom, and it shoots all the way through the dog's shoulder. That's good shoulder lay back, and that's good upper arm length. That's going to give that dog good reach in the front end. It's going to stand nice and tall and proud in the front end. That's going to help you with that top line. That's going to help the dog move correctly. Also, rear angles, same thing. You're looking for good turn to stifle right here. You'll see it in the rear, and you can spot a good rear. If it's super stiff and it goes straight down, you know there's something wrong with the rear. When you see a good rear, you'll know it. So pay attention to that as well. And like I said, if all of these things are well put together, the dog's well put together, movement's going to be on point. Proportion is key. When you're looking at the dog from the side, you see how square the dog is. If you drew a line from the point of the shoulder right here, all the way back to the point of the butt, to the ground, and then up front, right below the point of the elbow, it should be pretty square. You know, as close as square as possible. That's what you're looking for. That's how you're going to get that silhouette. not some long, lanky dog that's thin in the body or nothing else. And like I said, guys, proportion is key. That's what the standard calls for. So every time I do a breeding, these are all the things that I'm mainly looking for. Like I said, besides health, obviously you want healthy dogs. I'm not really concerned about a tail. I'm not that concerned about a bite, even though those things are also important. It's more important to have, in my opinion, to have the short muzzle. The muzzle should be a third of the length of the overall length from the muzzle to the top of the skull, okay? So this right here should be a third of the length of this measurement here, okay? So I care more about the shape of the head, the proportion of the head, before I worry so much about, oh my gosh, I have a slight underbite. You know what I mean? Those things you can fix, but you gotta have proportion. Same thing with the body. Like, I'm gonna pay attention to the body. I'm gonna pay attention to the front shoulder set, the rear, before I pay attention to, you know, oh, my dog's tail is 1.5 inches too short, or I have a little bit of a high tail set. So all these things are important. You are gonna pay attention to those things as well, but I'm telling you, these are the things that I focus on. And every time I pick a puppy off of a breeding, I'm looking at all these things on a breeding. And that, to me, like, that's my breeding tips to you guys. Like, that's what I look for every single time. If you're picking puppies that are super long in the back, that have short upper arms, that are super snippy in the head, and you're like, oh, well, he had good turn in the rear, so I picked him. Like I said, the rest of the dog is just shit. Like, the rest of the dog, you have a short upper arm, you're easty-westy, long in the back, snippy headpiece. That was a bad pick of the litter. You're looking for all these things, and obviously it's hard to get everything all in one. So the headpiece, that is the identity of the breed. You can have a really well put together dog, but if it doesn't have a good headpiece, to me, it's just a big no-no. Like, you gotta have a good headpiece. I would rather have a dog that is a little bit stiff in the rear, or maybe a little tight in the elbows with just a tiny bit of turn in the fronts. I would rather have something like that than have a bad headpiece. And I think headpieces are probably one of the harder things to fix, because there's so much involved in the head. You're talking like cheeks, muzzle length, eye separation, top skull, your side profile. You want a 90-degree side profile, underjaw. Like, there's how the lips fit. Are they loose? Are they tight? Do you have a lot of saggy skin? Like, so the headpiece is very complicated. It's not just simple. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna breed, you know, a dog with a short back to a dog with a short back. If you do that, 9 times out of 10, you're probably gonna get dogs with short backs. But the headpiece, there's not a lot of dogs that have the perfect headpiece. So you're looking at all those features, all those traits, all those specific things that you're trying to fix that you have. You may have like bulldog eyes that are more round, but you may also have a really good short muzzle because there's more bulldog in there. And you may breed that to a female that doesn't have much top skull and has a longer muzzle. That's probably a pretty good pairing. But when you keep the puppy off that breeding that you did, you're looking for the best of both. You're looking for the almond eyes that aren't bulldog, but you're also looking for the shorter muzzle that you got from the bulldog. You're looking for the cheeks, so you don't want too much shaggy skin. So it's real complicated, I feel like, when it comes to the headpiece, because there's so many things that have to be on point to have the perfect headpiece. So I think the headpiece is probably one of the most important things for me. And like I said, it's the identity of the breed. It's just like a bull terrier. They have that big Roman nose. You know, if they don't have that, they don't look like their breed. Breed specific, you gotta have the headpiece. It's a really big deal. So if you wanna take your breeding to the next level and you wanna progress forward every single time, I suggest that you make sure when you're picking puppies, you're pairing, first off, the parents that you're pairing together, they're gonna complement each other, okay? You're not trying to be slacking anywhere. So you do that, you make solid picks, you pick the best dog off the litter every single time, you push forward, and you do the same thing the very next generation. Whether you're using your own stud or using somebody else's stud, you make good pairings, and you make really good picks, and you're choosing all of these things. You're looking at everything that pertains to the standard you're trying to obtain. You're trying to accomplish in your bloodline. Do not let yourself get caught up and trying to fix one thing that you're so worried about. Don't focus on, oh my gosh, I gotta have nice fronts. That's the only thing I'm worried about. I gotta breed it to a dog that has really nice fronts. That's not all you have to worry about. You have to worry about all these things. If you can consistently do this and make good pairings, good picks off of every litter, move forward, you're going to progress in a positive direction, and you're gonna do it really freaking well. I promise you. It's not just about fixing one flaw. So you gotta focus on multiple things when doing breedings, when making picks. That's gonna take you to the very next level. I promise, guys. Anyway, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at bully.barn.b. Follow us on Facebook at Bully Barn. My number's 405-568-6846. If you guys have any questions, feel free to text or call. We do have some more videos coming up pretty soon. We did another progesterone on Armada today. She's gonna be bred to Horos. We have 2 females coming from Ecuador. They're shipping right now. They're in the process. It's a long process. We've got 3 or 4 females coming from Spain that we're super stoked about. We have some hitters coming, promise you guys. And I'm super stoked. I'm so ready to get more pups on the ground and show you guys what we have coming. I can't wait. Do not forget to like, subscribe, comment if you have any questions down below. Anyways, until next time, you guys have a good one.